The mead hall pulsed like a heart still gripped by war. Its rafters were heavy with smoke, not from the fire pit, but from the pelts, the wet steel, the lingering ozone of void travel. Around the central blaze, the giants of Fenris gathered, grey-armoured, frost-scarred, their canines glinting when they grinned. They spoke in low, rolling syllables older than High Gothic. It was not celebration. Not yet. That would take a word. That word came like thunder against the table. Logan Grimnar, the Great Wolf, the Old Wolf, rose. His warplate still bore the ash of the last kill. In his hand, a drinking horn crusted with the residue of years. Mjød, fermented on ice cliffs older than some stars, thick as sap and hotter than flame, sloshed in the curve of the beast horn vessel. Grimnar's voice did not rise. It dropped, like stone into snow. To the Lord Commander. No fanfare, no flourish, just the line. But the air shifted. Heads turned. Something ancient stirred in the silence between those 4 words. Then came the response. Not spoken, but howled. Fists slammed hide-wrapped tables. Mjød splashed like blood. And Rotgut Gilliman, son of Macraga, architect of the Codex Astartes, the Primarch who walked from myth into fire, stood. He raised his own vessel, crafted in glass, not horn. For a moment, he looked out of place. Then he drank. Not with the measured grace of Ultramar, but in silence. And the silence was louder than any toast. This wasn't a diplomatic gesture, it was a rite, a recognition. Grimnar hadn't yielded to the Lord Commander. He'd seen him bleed, fought beside him, and found in him not just strategy, but grit. The kind of grit that doesn't come from doctrine but from damage survived. This moment wasn't part of a war, it was after. And yet it cut deeper than any blade. The drink wasn't the point. What mattered was who offered it, and who took it. The Space Wolves don't kneel, they raise horns, they speak in blood and fermented fire. And when they toast, it isn't to show respect. It's to name someone part of the saga. Gilliman had entered the mead hall as a commander. He left it as a brother. And in that firelit pause before the next campaign, the Imperium held its breath, just long enough to remember what unity used to taste like. There are no feast halls in the cathedrals of the Ecclesiarchy, no laughter, no echo of horns lifted in jest or challenge. What they offer instead is ritual, precision, honed sharp enough to draw blood. And even in this austerity, even among candlelit tombs and sanctified silence, drink remains. Not for pleasure, not for warmth, for purification. It begins with Amasec. Distilled in the heart of shrine worlds, brewed from sacred groves genetically consecrated for purity, Amasec in the Ecclesiarchy is never poured lightly. It is measured like penance, administered like flame. In sororitas rites, it is used as communion, the burn of alcohol across the tongue, symbolizing the passage through pain into absolution. Each sip is a scar remembered, each chalice a memorial. In the rituals of the Ministorum, the vessel is as sacred as the contents, gilded reliquaries, bone-crafted cups sealed with wax and incense. The drink may be warm, but the moment is cold. Priests of the Emperor do not toast. They anoint, they condemn, they remember. One swallow marks the final threshold before martyrdom. Another, the last comfort before war. Among commissars, the act is sharpened further. A sip before judgment. A bottle left untouched on a desk moments before a bolt round brings order to a collapsing flank. Their Amasec is bitter by design, cut with alchemic compounds that sear the tongue and lacerate the throat. Because leadership, like faith, must hurt to be real. And yet, in the quiet hours, in the quarters of a weary preacher, there are moments when the bottle is not part of ceremony, when it is gripped by fingers more human than holy, when the seal is broken not for sanctity, but sorrow. These moments are buried, denied, but they persist, like the aftertaste of burned grain, long after the flame is gone. Not all drink within the shadow of the Emperor is sacred. Some do it to forget, others to remember. But no one drinks without consequence. Because in the Imperium, indulgence is never just about relief. It's confession. It's defiance. It's need laid bare. Faith doesn't erase the human need to feel, it reframes it. And when the Ecclesiarchy drinks, truly drinks, it does so with the full weight of history in its hands. Because in a galaxy where the only truth is war, the glass itself becomes scripture. And sometimes, fire is the only thing strong enough to carry memory forward. In the depths of Necromunda's underhive, where the ferrocrete walls sweat rust and the floor never stops trembling, alcohol isn't drink, it's oxygen. Rotgut booze, black market trank, soot-filtered Grox milk boiled down into something vaguely flammable. None of it is made for taste. It's made to kill slower than the alternative. Here spirits are not crafted but forced into being. Stills made from broken lasgun parts. Distilleries hidden behind sumpstream walls, guarded with tripwires and rust-clawed servitors. A dram of underhive fire brew can leave you blind, burned, or briefly godlike. That doesn't stop anyone. It makes it more valuable. Rotgut is currency. It's bribe, bounty, dowry, inheritance. It's what you offer a gang leader in place of loyalty. It's what you trade for a single clip of ammo or a dose of antifungal. To pour it out is insult. To waste it is crime. To water it down is suicide. And yet, in places like Vervenhive and the corpse-stacked levels of Hive Tarsis, ritual still blooms from the rot. Entire gangs center their identity around brews and fermentation rites. Drinking rites become law. Bottle blood pacts sealed not with ink, but with shared swallows of caustic burning sludge. Even the Astra Militarum patrols that descend into the depths carry special doses of chemically stabilized alcohol. Not to ease pain, but to numb the mind before breaching into cult territory. Every drink taken down here is a question. How much can you afford to lose? How deep have you already sunk? And every bottle left behind is a memory of someone who didn't crawl back to the surface. In Hive society, the vertical divide is more than just geography. At the top, glass flutes of Amasec chilled to precise temperature, poured by servo maids in silks. At the bottom, poison passed between scarred hands, filtered through rags and desperation. The drink reflects the man, or at least the version of him left alive. And through it all, Rotgut remains. Not refined, not purified, just present. Like mold, like rust, like rot that knows it'll outlive everyone drinking it. Because in the underhive, nothing is safe. Not the water, not the air, not the gods. But when the Rotgut burns the throat clean, when it lights a fire deep enough to hold off the cold for another hour, that's something close to faith. A violent, bitter, boiling kind of faith. The only kind the Hive knows. The Astra Militarum doesn't drink to celebrate. They drink to survive memory. In the trench lines of Valhalla, in the jungle hells of Katachan, on the sun-cracked wastes of Talon, alcohol isn't downtime, it's armor. When the Vox goes silent, when the Medicay's gone cold, when the Vox beads buzz with nothing but static, the guard turns to drink not to feel better, but to feel less. Standard issue rations across most regiments include a field flask. The substance inside is never labelled. Sometimes it's Amasec, diluted to last. Sometimes it's a local fermentation spiked with antipsychotics. Sometimes it's something nobody has a name for, only a warning. Do not drink unless you're already dying. But ritual persists, even among the lowest ranks. In the 170th Vervenhive Heavy Infantry, there's a tradition. One sip before deployment, one after the first confirmed kill, and one before lights out, if lights still exist. On Krieg, it's different. The death corps don't toast. They bury sealed bottles with the dead. A message in every cork. We'll drink when it's over. And for them, it never is. Commissars wield more than words and bolt pistols. Their presence at a drinking table changes everything. When a commissar accepts a cup, not as discipline, but as gesture, it signals more than camaraderie. It's a momentary reprieve from hierarchy, 1 minute of equality before the next firing squad. Then there's the oaths. In the 12th Brimlock Dragoons, New recruits drink a thin measure of ceremonial fire wine laced with their predecessors' ashes. It's not symbolic, it's literal. The belief: courage is transferred, pain is inherited, glory is a shared flammable burden. And still, drink never becomes indulgence. It's rationed, regulated, and watched. To drink without reason is weakness. To drink with purpose is power. Some regiments forbid it outright, others enforce it. There are commanders who issue Amasec before doomed charges, not for courage, but clarity, because no one wants to die confused. In caves of ice, the guard's drink is described not in flavour, but in temperature. Cold, brutal, necessary, something to make the caves feel slightly less like graves. Even Caiaphas Cain, hero to the people, fraud to himself, never drank without calculation. Every glass of Amasec was armour, every toast was deflection. That's the paradox of the guard's drinking culture. On the surface, unity, brotherhood, ceremony. But underneath, anesthetic. A soft edge to the hard truth that you were never expected to live. And so, around campfires built from burning ammo crates, beneath stars too distant to care, the guard drinks. Not for morale, not for glory, but because sometimes, for just 1 hour, it helps you forget you're human. There's a silence to Fenris that defies the void. Not the silence of peace, Fenris knows none, but the silence between blizzards, between roars, between sagas. It's in this pause, this breath before the next hunt, that mjød is poured. Fenrisian mjød is not crafted, it is conjured. Fermented in the frost guts of glacier beasts, aged beneath volcanic stone until it bites like ice and burns like vengeance. Its recipe is no secret. The ingredients are known, but the process is myth. Some say it brews best in caves touched by Russ himself. Others swear by blood added during the hunt fires. No one agrees. Everyone drinks. But to call it alcohol is to miss the point. Mjød on Fenris is inheritance. The space wolves do not drink in victory. They drink in memory. When a wolf falls, his saga is sung over mjød so thick it coats the throat like oath wax. When a pup earns his first kill, the same horn is passed to his hands. Never new, never clean. The horn remembers what the warrior might forget. And Logan Grimnar, the old wolf, king of storms, lord of the fang, does not raise that horn without reason. His warriors drink in great halls carved into mountain bones, where firelight plays against pelts and steel. Each horn lifted is part of a longer song, a line in an endless saga stretching back to the days when Leman Russ stalked the void with fangs bared and mjød on his breath. The drink itself is secondary. It could be mjød, it could be snowmelt blood wine, it could be the distilled oil of a slain void leviathan. What matters is the act. The horn lifted, the silence held, the name spoken. Even outsiders feel it. In Prospero Burns, a chronicler speaks of watching space wolves drink not for mirth, but for meaning. He says it feels like watching gods remember their men, and in that remembering, they become something more than either. Because mjød on Fenris is not refreshment, it's ritual, it's bond, it's defiance in the face of extinction. Every horn poured is a refusal to forget. Every swallow is a promise that the past lives, even if the man doesn't. They say the mjød keeps the cold out, they're wrong. The cold never leaves. The mjød just reminds you that you still feel it. Mars forbids fermentation. In the temples of the Omnissiah, taste is treason. Anything that clouds input, anything that dulls the edge of logic or slows the blessed churn of binary thought, is heresy. The machine spirit does not tolerate haze, and yet, they drink. Not openly, not often. But deep beneath the red surface, in forgotten subcrypts and rogue manufactorums, tech priests crack open sealed reliquaries containing spirits so old, their ingredients are no longer catalogued. These are not drinks in the human sense. They are substances, chemical sequences brewed from extinct algae strains, or solvent-aged concoctions calculated to interact with wetware at the molecular level. They do not call it alcohol, they call it cognidistillate, neuroslurry, data fog, The Adeptus Mechanicus does not drink to celebrate, it drinks to explore. The few who partake do so with surgical precision, mapping the effects on cognition like cartographers of self-induced error. Some believe there are hidden patterns in intoxication, that drunken logic might mirror the divine madness of the Omnissiah's original thought. Those caught are sanctioned, not because they disobeyed, because they dared to humanize. But not all tech priests see flesh as error. Among the more eccentric explorators, stories speak of void ships where alcohol is engineered rather than brewed, drinks that interface with mechadendrites, bonding with internal circuitry to simulate euphoria. A chemical ritual reverse-engineered from ancient Terran lore. And on pleasure worlds orbiting forge moons, where tech adepts moonlight as flesh hosts for nobles, drink flows under supervision. Calibrated spirits. Caloric cocktails tracked in real time. The flesh is allowed indulgence, but only when it serves the audit. Yet even these heretical sips reveal something vital, the tension inside the cult mechanicus. The dogma says the flesh is weak, but the circuits that house their minds still remember warmth, a distant, pre-augmetic craving. That's why they drink, not often, not proudly. But when the static rises and the prayers stall, when logic alone no longer soothes the machine spirit's whisper, even the most sanctified tech priest might reach for a vial. And in that moment, the difference between man and machine isn't code. It's what burns on the tongue. In the spire palaces of the segmentum nobility, Amasec is not poured. It is unveiled. Velvet drapes, servo sommeliers, crystalline flutes sculpted by bonded artisans from Lucidum Prime. The ceremony is silent, a pageant of gestures. The drink itself? Aged 500 years in void-hung casks, chilled by atmosphere leak to preserve the bouquet of a harvest that cost 2 hive rings worth of lives. And it's never about the flavour. Among the highborn, Amasec is a message. Vintage is lineage. Colour is allegiance. Bouquet is betrayal. A sour note, a poorly chosen year, a bottle served half a degree too cold. Any one of these can start a blood feud, or worse, end one. House Ulanti once executed an envoy because the bottle he offered predated the founding of their spire. The insult wasn't chronological, it was genealogical. They drank it anyway. Rogue traders take this further. For them, alcohol is politics bottled. Some collect brews from extinct civilizations, storing them in stasis vaults as trophies, or blackmail. Others trade in liquors banned by the Ecclesiarchy, substances so intoxicating they require mind locks just to possess. A toast at a rogue trader's banquet is never just a toast. It's a trap with a stem and a vintage label. And yet, for all its manipulation, for all its artifice, there are moments when even the highborn drink honestly. In Fulgrim, the wine flows not in ritual, but in rot. It becomes a conduit for something darker, a slow descent into indulgence as ideology. The glass reflects not elegance, but erosion, of will, of purpose, of self. Because Amasec in the upper tiers is never just about taste, its memory filtered through wealth, ambition, and deceit. The glass becomes a mirror, and what it shows isn't always flattering, but still they drink. Because every noble knows, no matter how high your spire rises, it's only ever one scandal away from collapse. And if you're going to fall, you might as well savour the vintage on the way down. Behind every drop of Amasec is a field that never sees the stars. Agri-worlds, lush, battered, and forgotten, are the green lungs of the Imperium. But they do not breathe for themselves. Their skies are choked with orbiting harvesters. Their soil is tilled not by farmers but by indentured generations bound by crop quotas and genetic debt. And alcohol is one of their few exports that still carries identity. There is no celebration in its creation, just quotas. In places like Krieg's reclamation zones or the rain-choked ridges of Attila, entire seasons are given over to fermentation. Grox herds are bled for milk and marrow, their bones crushed to feed vat vines that bloom once every standard decade. Grain is harvested not when it ripens, but when administratum augurs calculate maximum carbohydrate extraction. The result? Liquors so nutrient-dense they can be fed intravenously, spirits that double as fuel or antiseptic, brewed not for taste, for transport. Each barrel is logged, each flask numbered. And those who fail to meet their tithe see more than profit loss. They see population cuts, orbital sanctions, or worse, forced population redistribution to compensate for excess consumption. In the Imperium, starvation is not failure, it is logistics. And yet, in the gaps between harvests, when the tithe ships have left and the overseers sleep, some workers drink what little they can hide. Not much, barely enough to call it a sip, but enough to remember. Because for them, alcohol isn't culture. It's defiance, a stolen moment, a pause, a whisper of identity smuggled between mouthfuls of state-assigned sustenance. There are entire subsects of the cult Mechanicus devoted to optimizing fermentation output. There are Arbites raids on unauthorized vintage hoarding. There are Puritan conclaves that consider rural alcohol a heretical attempt to imitate ecclesiarchal rites. But the fields keep growing. And somewhere, beneath a trellis not yet bombed, someone pours a glass not for trade, not for tithe, but for taste. For the memory of what their world used to be. For the hope it might one day be more than the Empire's stomach. Because even in the Imperium, hunger isn't just about food, it's about not being allowed to want. The Imperium's laws are clear. Contact with Xenos substances is punishable by death. Not exile, not reprimand, death. No exceptions. And yet, Xenos brews exist in every major trade port and rogue outpost from the Pale Stars to the edges of the Halo Zone. Because forbidden drinks are more than addiction. They are insight, power, heresy in liquid form. Orcs are the crudest. Their brew is fungus-based, green as war paint and twice as corrosive. It ferments in their own skin oils, stored in rust cans, spat into mugs. They call it squig beer. It doubles as fuel, antiseptic, and sometimes ammunition. Humans who drink it tend to lose teeth, hair, or memories, but a few claim it grants visions of war gods, red suns, and infinite battlescapes. None survive the week. The Eldar offer no such hospitality. Eldari soul wine is never traded, only stolen. Distilled from psychic resonance, memories suspended in liquid thought. Even a drop can fracture a baseline human's mind into kaleidoscopic ruin. But the Drukhari twist this further. Their venomous elixirs are brewed not for flavor, but for torment. Each sip calibrated to induce a specific hallucination, each swallow a scream. Tau, in contrast, manufacture intoxication. They don't drink to feel, they drink to obey. Euphoric suppressants distributed via vaporized dispersal. Subtle, scentless, calming. It's not alcohol, it's compliance. For humans in the Empire's fringe systems, these synthetics become escape routes, not from pain, but from thought. Then there are the forbidden legends, the crystalline ichors of Necron tomb worlds that induce time dislocation, the fungal sap of the Hrud, drinkable entropy, the unknown liquids traded on Comorar's slave marts that cause your bloodstream to burn in sync with distant stars. These are not myths, they are confiscated, documented, and buried by the Ordo Xenos, vaulted, sealed, catalogued by those who will never taste them, not for safety, for control. Because the Imperium knows, the moment you drink the blood wine of a dead culture, something of it lives in you. And in a galaxy built on extermination, even taste is treason. For most Space Marines, alcohol is irrelevant. Their gene-forged bodies burn toxins before they register. Their minds are trained against want, hunger, pleasure, regret, all redundant, all erased. And yet, in the silence left behind, something lingers. Astartes do not drink in the traditional sense, but they remember what it means. The act, the ritual, the symbol. It's coded into their heritage, buried in the bones of their human origin. And though the flesh forgets, the soul does not. Most chapters forbid it outright, not by decree, but by irrelevance. Why drink when you feel no pain? Why numb yourself when your mind is already steel? For the Ultramarines, such indulgence is beneath their discipline. For the Iron Hands, it's weakness made liquid. For the Black Templars, it's heresy. But the absence matters. Because when an Astartes does drink, when he chooses to, it isn't casual, it's catastrophic. There are records, quiet ones, footnotes in chapter archives, a salamander pouring charred liquor over the names of fallen kin, the firelight catching tears he insists are from smoke. A Raven Guard survivor holding a flask he never opens, its contents older than his service, sealed since Istvan. A blood angel sipping a drop of fermented blood wine under starlight, alone, long after the battle, whispering a name long deleted from the rolls. They don't drink for taste. They drink when they remember they were human. And for the space wolves, exceptions as always, drink is not indulgence, but tradition. Their mjød is culture, not chemical. It doesn't dull the edge, it sharpens it. For them, abstinence would be sacrilege. But even among the stoic ranks of chapters who abstain, there are rituals, simulations, symbolic sips, ceremonial cups raised in honor, poured over battle brother graves, never consumed. Not because they cannot, because they shouldn't. Because for a warrior sculpted into silence, one drop is too loud. Alcohol for an Astartes is not an escape, it's a door. And once opened, even briefly, the things that step through are not always welcome. The angels do not speak of it, they don't have to. The absence says enough. They come from everywhere. Night Lords and Nova Marines, sons of Vulcan, sons of Dawn, brought together not by heritage, but by necessity, drafted, pledged, seconded. The Death Watch isn't a chapter, it's an interruption, and its warriors carry not just weapons, but fragments of fractured tradition. So when they drink, when they truly drink, it means something has broken through the silence. There are no formal rites recorded in Death Watch treatises, no standard toasting protocols. The Codex Astartes offers nothing on shared libations between disparate gene lines. But it happens. In fortress monasteries, built into dead moons, between missions, after losses, after victories too narrow to count as survival. It's never planned. It's never announced. But when a kill team returns from a Xenos hunt that should have killed them, sometimes one of them produces a flask. Sometimes it's mjød, brought illegally by a wolf blade. Sometimes it's reconstituted Amasec, drawn from a watch station's forgotten cellar. Sometimes it's a bottle with no name, no origin, just something one of them held onto from a life already erased. And they pour, not for each other, for the dead. No stories, no speeches, just a tilt of the flask over a bolter, a few drops on the cold stone, and a silence held for exactly 30 heartbeats. Not out of superstition, out of agreement. Because in a place where the chain of command is tangled by pride, doctrine, and suppressed hatred, the one thing that binds them is the memory of someone who bled before them. These moments are never recorded, not even in personal logs. To document them would be to acknowledge feeling. And feeling, in the halls of the Death Watch, is a dangerous thing. But there's a pattern. Veterans keep watch while the others drink. Novitiates are only allowed to observe until their first confirmed solo purge. And after, the flask is passed with one hand only, the offhand. Always the offhand. Because the weapon hand must stay ready. Even here, even now. Because kill teams don't get peace. They get pause. They don't get brotherhood. They get contract. But still, every so often, in the aftermath of screams and silence, a horn is lifted. A flask uncorked. And in that gesture, across gene seed and grudge, there is unity. Not the kind that lasts, just the kind that matters. There are planets in the Imperium where no one remembers pain. Not because it's absent, but because it's been overwritten. Pleasure worlds are anomalies, not errors, not paradises. They are systems designed to consume desire, moderate indulgence, and feed the Imperium with something far more precious than food or fuel: compliance. And alcohol here is not a commodity. It's infrastructure. Spirits on these worlds aren't brewed. They're engineered. Psychoactive liquors calibrated by mood augurs. Wines laced with euphoric harmonics tuned to individual genomes. Vapors that deliver intoxication through scent, bypassing ingestion entirely. These are not drinks for taste. These are chemicals shaped into experience. The populace doesn't order drinks. They're assigned them. By caste, by temperament, by emotional profile. You drink what the world tells you, what the system calculates you'll love or fear. Entire taverns operate like cathedrals of sensation, moodscapes, experience vaults. Each swallow mapped, each buzz measured, each reaction logged in data looms monitored by the Adeptus Administratum. It is not hedonism, it's governance. Off-world nobles come to these places to forget they matter. Enforcers from hiveworlds arrive on leave and never leave. Even rogue traders visit, but only in disguise. Because the moment you enter orbit, the system begins adjusting you. And once you drink, you're part of it. The Ecclesiarchy denounces these worlds. Officially. But tithes still flow. And there are whispers. Rumours of cardinals lost in velvet wine crypts, their minds unravelled one vintage at a time. But the real horror isn't the intoxication. It's the fact that it works. Crime is non-existent. Productivity is perfect. There's no dissent, no rage, no memory of injustice. Just curated euphoria. A galaxy of screams, silenced beneath soft lights and sweeter drinks. And in the centre of it all, behind the illusion of velvet and laughter, sits the same truth that governs Necromunda, Fenris, Terror. You drink what you're told. Not because you want to, but because you no longer remember how not to. There are billions who will never see a battlefield. They live and die inside hab blocks older than their surnames, breathing recycled air thick with machine oil and static. They do not fight for the Emperor with rifles or oaths. They fight to stay asleep, and their weapons are crude. Low sticks wrapped in stained wax paper, bootleg trank brewed in sump drains and sold in relabeled Medici vials. Cheap distilled ethanol masquerading as off-world Amasec, its contents closer to cleaning solvent than spirit. There is no ritual, no tradition, just need. In places like Habstack G17 on Necromunda or the ash-choked courtyards of Vervenhive, it's not about flavour, it's about quiet, about carving out an hour, just one, where the thrum of machinery and the threat of labour penalties fall silent. A moment where the lights flicker slower, where the walls feel less close. To the Administratum, these substances are tolerated, not endorsed, not forbidden, tolerated. Because a sedated worker doesn't riot, a dosed workforce processes faster. The occasional overdose is less costly than dissent, and so the cycle turns. Rationed wages buy rationed poison. Overseers look the other way, and the same bottles get passed down like heirlooms, filled and refilled with whatever burns enough to count. Families split sips of trank like communion. Lovers share low sticks as vows. Children inherit empty flasks as reminders that their fathers once tried to forget too. And in the dark corners of sub-level dens, artists, real ones, the kind that only exist where death is constant, paint murals with soot and breath fumes, their hands shaking from the wrong kind of wine. They don't drink to feel good. They drink to feel anything. Because in a hive that never sleeps, where cogitator screens outnumber windows, the only rebellion left is choosing how to go numb. And every so often, someone saves up for the real thing. A bottle of true Amasec, stolen from a passing convoy, bought with a decade's worth of meal chits. It's cracked open in silence, among friends who still remember their names, and passed around like a relic. It doesn't last. But for that one night, it means everything. Because for the lowborn, intoxication isn't luxury. It's proof they're still human. Some drinks are not for the living. They are for those about to cross the line. For those who know there is no coming back. Not from the wound, not from the order, not from the silence that waits on the other side of the bolter's recoil. These drinks are not shared. They are not tasted. They are endured. In the Ecclesiarchy, the final sacrament is often liquid. Not holy water, not wine, fire, a sip of blessed Amasec, triple distilled and flame-kissed at the altar. The burn isn't accidental. It's the point. The faithful take it before martyrdom, before a suicide charge, before stepping into a role that ends in flame. The pain purifies. The throat is cleansed. The words that follow come clean. Among the sisters of battle, the ritual is quieter. Before deployment, a vial no larger than a thumb is passed from canoness to squad. Each sister takes one drop, no toast, no prayer. The burn binds them in silence. What matters is not what is said, but what is felt in unison. Unity by fire, communion by flame. On the battlefield, when all rites fail and the vox has gone dark, there are improvised rites. An officer's last swig, a battlefield priest sharing his flask with a guardsman too far gone to scream. A bottle cracked open with trembling hands in a bunker full of corpses, the survivor drinking not to live, but to remember who didn't. And then there are the ghosts, the ones who survived the war, but never made it back. They drink every year, on the same date, with the same words, to no one. Some pour it on the floor, some leave it untouched. Some stare at the bottle, whispering names the administratum erased from record. Because in the Imperium, drink is not escape. It is evidence that pain was felt, that someone mattered, that a soul was here and burned. And when that drink scorches the throat, when it turns the breath into fire and the stomach into ash, it's not just chemistry. It's ritual. It's memory made real. And for just 1 second, the Emperor hears it. Across the galaxy, the bottles are empty. Not shattered, not discarded, just drained. Each one left behind like a sentence half finished. A chapel pew with no sermon, a gravestone with no name. And in their silence, a question. What does it mean that the Imperium drinks? It means tradition, hollowed by time. It means memory, sharpened into ritual. It means that even in a regime defined by obedience, bureaucracy, and fire, there is still room, barely, for something as irrational as a toast. The galaxy doesn't run on faith alone. It runs on habit, on repetition, on rites performed long after their meaning has faded. But drink lingers. It resists automation. It refuses to be clean. Every culture, every class, every creed in the Imperium has found a way to distill what they can't say into what they can swallow. And those drinks become fossils. Rotgut brewed in sump pits where no sun has ever reached. Mjød passed from frost-slick hand to frost-slick hand, thick with saga. Communion Amasec kissed with blood. Soul wine stolen from a dead race's forgotten altar. They persist. They rot. They ferment into stories. That's the aftertaste. It isn't flavour. It's weight. The kind that settles in your gut long after the cup is dry. The kind that outlives the people who brewed it. The kind that turns every forgotten bottle into a monument no one intended to build. Because the Imperium isn't built from stone. It's built from ash. And ash remembers what fire can't. So when you see a guardsman pour out the last of his flask, when you watch a tech priest hold a vial he'll never drink, when you hear a space wolf howl over mjød gone stale, understand what it means. Something burned, something lived. And the Imperium, despite everything, is still haunted by the taste.